Who here likes my fancy shirt? Ooh, yeah, buddy. We are just being all of the flamboyant today. I totally love it. I got two of these shirts. One's a little bit different. It's more green and blue. And I might say, I looked in the mirror and it's not bad. It's not bad. You're welcome. So, that being said, one of the reasons why I'm wearing this fancy shirt is, have you ever done something really stupid? Really stupid. Like something you look afterwards and you're just like, really? So I had a couple of those this week. One's a big one. One was a very expensive one. Very expensive one. And my tablet wants to connect to a hotspot. Somebody's got a hotspot. Uh-oh. Okay. So this week we're talking about vacuum pumps. It's a lesson on vacuum pumps. It's a whole thing. Throw that picture up there for me. Yeah, that one. Anybody know what that is? No! That's just a part, come on. Something that spins? That's good. Cylinder's getting close. What? Nope. You should know better. That's my wife and she should know. McKenna? That's helpful. Well, okay, Nathan, save everybody because apparently that's a rotor. Want to know why? Take a guess. It rotates. Amazing. It's amazing. Super creative name. See that? Go to the next line. It's definitely broken. See that line there? That little score thing? That's bad. It's very bad. See that line? That's bad. Okay, it's about as bad as this video that we're gonna watch. Throw the video up for me. That's what it feels like when it seizes on the bench and stops spinning, because I just look at it and go, well, that just cost a lot of money. Very bad thing. Essentially, it's garbage. It cannot be used. Yes, that little line is garbage. Absolutely garbage. Throw up the pump picture for me with the price. Yeah, so rebuilt, that's what it comes out of. That's how much that's worth. That's US dollars. It comes to about $3,400 Canadian. Throw up the next picture for me. That's how much that part costs in US dollars. You know how much I can charge to fix that pump? $1,000. $1,000. That's what I can charge to fix that pump. That was an expensive mistake. Here. Throw up the next picture. See that little blue dot? That's lint from a rag. That lint is what caused that line. The thickness, the distance between the rotating part, the rotor part, and the part that stays stationary, guess what that's called? A stator. The distance between the two pieces is half the thickness of a regular piece of paper at 1,800 RPM, rotations per minute. Lint. One piece of lint. I pulled the thing apart, I looked at the rotor, and it had a little piece of blue lint right there, and I was like, well, that was stupid. Yeah, I had to laugh. That's all I could do. It was stupid. I know better. I've been doing this for 20 years. You know how many of these things a year I fix? Take a wild guess. Maybe 30, 25, 30 of them a year. I'm at a point now, after almost 20 years of doing this, I'm an expert. If I closed my eyes, I could tell you how many fasteners are in this pump. I'm an expert. And that screwed it all up. But the worst part is the part that bothers me the most, that's the culprit. It's my fault. Because I wasn't paying attention. You know why? Because I'm an expert and I know how to do all of the things. See? He knows. He knows. He knows. I'm sorry, what's your name? Punya? Punya's like, that guy right there. See? See? Big screw up. Saving grace. Saving grace. I had one of these pumps sitting on the shelf with a blown motor. So I could take the part that I needed out of it and put it in there. But now that pump is no good if I find a good motor. Very expensive mistake. Big screw up. Big screw up. You ever screw up like that? You ever screw up where you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Like even as something as simple as like you're walking through the living room floor. Or living room floor. You're not walking through the living room floor. That's silly. Why would you walk through the living room floor? But you might walk across the living room floor. And the couch that has been there for 5 years, you go, ow! It hasn't moved. The couch has been there. It hasn't moved. It's not like little garden gnomes came into your house in the middle of the night while you were sleeping and we're like, you know what we're going to do? Move that couch 4 inches that way. So that kids might. Goblins. Or like walk into a wall. You ever walk into a wall? I've walked into walls. That's stupid. The wall's been there the whole time. Just walk right into it. You know better. The one thing that I am grateful for, and that puts my mind at ease, is we are lucky to have biblical characters that are the perfect model of how stupid we are sometimes. My favorite one is Peter. Peter is a biblical screw-up. Biblical. I thought that worked really well. Biblical screw-up. See, a few weeks ago, we had the account of the Last Supper, right? Where Jesus tells Peter that Peter will deny him 3 times. That's a big deal, right? So Peter's walked and followed Jesus for the last 3 years. He's seen miracles and all these signs of wonder. He's seen Jesus heal people, right? He's seen Jesus cast out demons. Lots of wine, making wine from water, right? He's seen Jesus talk back to religious elite, the people that were like the most powerful people there. Jesus talks back to them. He's watched Jesus preach in courtyards and temples and watched Jesus preach the Sermon on the Mount in front of all those people and feed thousands of people with just a couple loaves of bread and some fish. Jesus telling Peter that Peter will deny him seems insane. We're at the end of the 3 years, right? We're coming to the end. We're like hours away from all of the badness happening, and Peter cannot fathom that he would deny Jesus, right? And then we next thing that we have, what happens next? They go out to the garden, right? Go out to the garden. Peter's there with all the other disciples and stuff like that. And Judas comes, right? And gets him arrested. Spoiler alert, the guy on the right, that's Judas. Right? So what does Peter do? Peter decides he's going to get his little swordy sword out there and defend Jesus. Why? Why does Peter do this? Well, partially because he's got a sword, and you never bring a sword to a fight unless you're planning on using it, which is an interesting thing we'll get to in a second. But what he does, I think, and I can't prove this, but I think what he's doing with this sword by cutting this guy's ear off, he's like, see, Jesus? See what I would do for you because I love you? I would use this sword, cut some dude's ear off because I can prove myself. I would never deny you. Well, it doesn't go so well, right? Jesus rebukes Peter and then heals the guy. Jesus heals the guy that is there to arrest him, to torture him, to crucify him, string him up. And Peter stands there watching the whole thing, just flabbergasted. Like I get this picture of that, right? See, Jesus, I cut that dude's ear off for you. I'd never deny you. But then Peter does deny Jesus. In John 18, 15 through 25, we'll read the whole thing. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. It was probably John. That other disciple was known to the high priest, and he went into the high priest's courtyard along with Jesus, while Peter stood outside by the gate. So the other disciple, being known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the woman on the gate. Then he brought Peter inside. And the woman on the gate spoke to Peter, "You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?" She asked. "Well, no, I'm not," replied Peter. It was cold, and the slaves and the attendants had made a charcoal fire. And they were standing around it warming themselves, and Peter was standing there with them and warming himself. This picture for a second. I'm going to read that again. It was cold. The slaves and the attendants had made a charcoal fire, and they were standing around it warming themselves. And Peter was standing there with them and warming himself. The high priest asked Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. So Peter's standing there warming himself after just denying Jesus while Jesus is being interrogated. Get that picture in your head. And Jesus says, "I've spoken to the world quite openly. I always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Judeans gather. I didn't say anything in secret. Why are you asking me? There were people who listened to me. Ask them what I said. Don't you see? They know what I said." And when Jesus said that, one of the attendants standing there gave him a slap on the face. "Is that how you answer the high priest?" he said. "If I've said something wrong," replied Jesus, "give evidence about what was wrong with it. But if what I said was true, why are you hitting me?" Where's Peter in all of this? He just cut some dude's ear off, and he's over there warming himself by fire. So, and I can't pronounce this dude's name, so Annas went and sent him off, still tied up to Caiaphas, the high priest. And Simon Peter, meanwhile, was standing there warming himself. And somebody says to him, "You're not one of his disciples, are you?" And he denied it. "No, I'm not," he said. And one of the high priest's slaves, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, spoke up, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" And Peter denied it once more, and instantly the rooster crowed. We're talking a matter of hours maybe between the time when Peter cuts this guy's ear off and then Peter standing there denying Jesus. How demoralizing must it have been for Peter to do that? "Look what I did for you." And Jesus says no. And then Peter follows, right, into the courtyard, and all of this is happening. You get this sense of Peter watching this, just trying to figure out what's going on. And maybe not knowing what to do now. Jesus and the disciples have gone out to the garden, and Judas brings the soldiers there. We hear about this sword, the sword that Peter has. Kind of weird that Jesus is walking around with a guy with a sword, right? It seems a little bit contradictory to the story. So we got to jump back to a passage in Luke 22:38. It says, "Look, Lord, here are two swords." And Jesus answers, "That is enough." Why would Jesus do that? Why would Jesus say, well, 2 swords is enough? Why not 3? Why not 1? I can't answer that question. I don't know. Jesus did know that they wanted the swords for protection. Well, apparently rightfully so. Jesus gets arrested, and fortunately, Peter has a sword. Then the soldiers arrest Jesus, because swords and cutting people's ears off helps when the cops come to arrest you. It makes everything better. Any stories where police come to arrest somebody and somebody has a sword, it never ends well. Just saying. So Peter, now Jesus is in the high priest's courtyard after Peter did that. Find it interesting that servant knows who Peter is, because the night before he was like, or the night of that, a couple hours beforehand, "Didn't I see you cut that dude's ear off?" My cousin's ear off? Weren't you there? You were there with Jesus when you cut his ear off. You were there. Because Peter gets into the courtyard. He's not supposed to be there, but somebody sneaks him in. He gets into the courtyard and is watching this whole thing, and immediately they start accusing him because that makes perfect sense. Of course they would. And Peter is standing around a fire drum, warming his hands while Jesus is in the courtyard being interrogated, and someone asks him again, "You aren't one of his disciples, are you?" And Peter says, "I am not." That's strike two. And Peter's called out by a relative of the guy. "Hey, didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Peter denies him the third time, and the rooster crows. Could you imagine for a second? All of this has just happened in a very brief period of time, okay? They had the Last Supper, and it was like this celebratory thing, and then Jesus gets a little bit dark and weird, and then they're like, okay, we're going to go off to the garden, and there's some praying that happens over there, and they're having some fun, doing their little thing, and then Judas shows up with a bunch of soldiers, and Judas has done this like sneaky little thing, kiss of death kind of Italian weird thingy, right? And the soldiers come to arrest him, and Peter's like, "Oh, here, I got a sword. Slicey slice, cut dude's ear off," right? And now all of a sudden Jesus heals the guy in front of everybody. How weird would that be? A bunch of soldiers are standing there ready to arrest Jesus. We're going to take him off to be tortured and crucified. And Jesus is like, "Don't worry, dude, I got you. I'm going to heal your ear. Sorry about that, Peter. That was stupid. Don't do that. That was bad." Right? And now Peter's in the courtyard denying Jesus. And then this rooster crows. I wonder, do you remember where Jesus talks about this rooster crowing, that he would deny him 3 times? And then it says, "I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me." I cannot imagine that what Jesus said didn't flash through Peter's head. It almost feels like the way that it is written out, and then the rooster crowed. It feels like, pow, man, that was a stupid mistake. There's no way Peter didn't connect that, didn't go, oh. And I also find it interesting that, there's another disciple there, right? He's the guy that got Peter into the room, but nobody questions him about whether or not he's one of hanging around with Jesus and one of Jesus' disciples. Nobody questions him. They just question Peter. Why do you think it might be because everybody knows that Peter cut that dude's ear off and Jesus healed it? Only thing that makes sense to me. I could be wrong. I never read anything that said that, but it just seems to make sense. So with that, we're going to jump forward into some of Peter's actions and teachings and Acts and his letters to Asia Minor. In Acts 2, we have the story of Pentecost, right? It's when the disciples were filled with the Holy Spirit, and a crowd gathered around stunned because they were hearing wonders of God proclaimed in their own language. That was Peter. Our friend Peter is the first to speak up and tells the crowd that God will pour out a Spirit on all people. Then he uses language that Caesar always used. He says in Acts 4:12, "Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved." That's a hardcore jab against Caesar and a whole other sermon. In Acts, we constantly hear Peter stepping up, responding to the Holy Spirit, connecting to people seeking to learn about Jesus. Peter leads the apostles in expanding expanding the church in Acts 9:32. He heals a guy named Ananias from paralysis in Acts 9:32 through 35. He baptized followers in the name of Jesus for the first time. That's a big deal. So Peter does all of this crazy stuff after denying Jesus 3 times, after cutting some guy's ear off, after doing. But then in Galatians, we have this really cool thing that happens between Peter and Paul, where Peter and Paul work together to unite the Jewish followers of Jesus with the Gentile followers of Jesus. That's a whole other sermon too, right? But they work together, and Paul's working with the Israelites, and Peter's working with the Gentiles. Or no, sorry, I got that backwards. I apologize. Paul's working with the Gentiles. Oh, come on. All right. And Peter writes this letter to the church and the Jesus followers in Asia Minor, encouraging them and instructing them and reminding them to emulate Jesus. It was funny, when I was researching this, I kind of get this sense reading through 1st and 2nd Peter that clearly I think Peter's looking back to maybe this exact moment in today's passage. So we'll read this, 1 Peter 2, 6 through 9. To you who trust him, he's a stone to be proud of, but to those who refuse to trust him, the stone the workman threw out is now the chief foundation stone. For the untrusting, it's a stone to trip over, a boulder blocking the way. They trip and fall because they refuse to obey, just as predicted. You see the connection? I can't be the only one that sees the connection, right? Because Jesus predicted, for lack of maybe a better term, maybe prophesied, that Peter would deny him and trip up, right? For the untrusting, it's a stone to trip over, a boulder blocking the way. They trip and fall because they refuse to obey, just as predicted. In 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, it says, but you are the ones chosen by God, chosen for the high calling of priestly work, chosen to be a holy people, God's instruments to do his work and speak out for him, to tell others of the night and day difference he made for you, from nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. That's from the Message. Would I be wrong in connecting this idea from nothing? Well, hold on a second here. Where is it? From nothing to something, from rejected to accepted. Would I be wrong in connecting Peter denying Jesus to that? I don't know. I could sit for, I don't know, maybe in the next couple hours and just talk about Peter. Because Peter's amazing. Peter, if you just go home and read some Peter stuff. Just go look it up on Google. Go home and read some Peter stuff. Because you could just read Peter and be like, oh, that's my life. Well, at least maybe I could. Remember, we're talking about Peter. Okay? Matthew 14, 25 through 31, it says, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. I love the language. Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Well, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. And Jesus says, come. And what does Peter do? Peter goes, all right, and starts walking, jumps out of the boat, starts walking on the water. Walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? Peter is a biblical screw-up. Peter makes a lot of mistakes in the Gospels while he's trying to figure things out. He spends a lot of time questioning Jesus. He screws up in the garden, cutting that soldier's ear off. He screws up denying Jesus. He screws up whenever he questions his faith. Peter is a biblical screw-up. He doesn't get it right. He consistently doesn't get it right. He consistently has to have his focus redirected back to Jesus all the time, over and over and over again. So if Peter is a biblical screw-up and Peter needs to be redirected back to Jesus on a consistent basis, what makes us think we have it figured out? Because I am one of those people still. I'm like, man, why can't I get this right? Why do I make this stupid decision I know is not the way that I'm supposed to live my life, but you know what? I'm just going to do it anyways. And then I regret it, right? Then I look back afterwards and I go, well, that was dumb. Do you do that? Have you done that? I don't think I'm hoping nobody in this room is like, nah, I got all my shit together. Nah, I got it all figured out. I don't need no help. I don't make none of them mistakes. I'm not a biblical script like Peter. You know who's got it all together? Paul. Paul had it all sorted out. I'm like, Paul. Peter actually denies Jesus 3 times. Now, I'd like to also point out that the only disciple that is a bigger screw up than Peter, Judas. Judas is the biggest to screw up, right? Judas is the biggest one. Peter's second. He's the second biggest screw up in the entire Bible, in the entire New Testament, in the entire Gospels. Second biggest. If Peter is the second biggest screw up in the Gospels, who lived with Jesus for 3 years, there is nothing that I'm going to do, the screw up, that Jesus can't look at me and go, don't worry, Roy, I got you. Still good. I love you. Just follow me next time. Hey, I'm heading in this direction. Why don't you come along with me? It's okay. You're not going to get lost because I've got you. There is nothing. Peter didn't. Jesus still loved Peter. When did things go bad for Peter? Like, when did he have those struggles? It's only when he didn't trust and believe, only when he didn't have faith, only when he didn't follow, only when he didn't keep God's commandments, his commandments. And the same thing happens to us. Like when we turn away from Jesus in our lives, we make stupid decisions. So Friday night, we had pub night. I ordered chicken wings. They were fantastic until 2 a.m. And I looked at Hope before I ordered them. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have chicken wings. And she says, are you sure? Yeah, it's a great idea. I'm going to have chicken wings. She's like, you probably shouldn't. I should not have had chicken wings on Friday night. I was tasting chicken wings until 3 p.m. yesterday. Yeah, buddy, that was a great idea. There's no way, like if I use chicken wings as an object lesson for you right now today, there is no way that I should have had chicken wings on Friday night, and I knew it. And I did it anyways. Why? Because I'm an idiot. Was Heather clapping? That wasn't very nice. But no, seriously, I know better. But Jesus keeps calling us back. And I can prove it. I can prove it. I did it. I did the reading. I have a cool software thing that shows me all the things. Yeah, it's awesome. We have precedent. Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And John records this interaction between Jesus and Peter right at the end of John's gospel. And it's actually titled, Jesus Reinstates Peter. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, Peter, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. I get this feeling like it's like, well, why would you ask this question? You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Okay? And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He's talking to Peter. And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And for a 3rd time, Jesus says to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the 3rd time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. The passage goes on, but I'm not taking anybody's thunder over the next couple of weeks. Jesus pulls Peter back in. We're going to eventually cover what happens between today's passage and this passage over the next couple of weeks. And what I really want you guys to hear from me today, and I think this is very important, I actually think it's foundational. If Judas was the worst, Peter's denial of Jesus is second worst. I want you to picture this. Jesus is on his hands and knees in shackles in front of a crowd of people in the chief high priest's courtyard, being slapped around. And his closest friend, one of his closest friends, someone he spent the last 3 years, the vast majority of the last 3 years with, publicly says, I do not know this man. That's heartbreaking. Jesus, on his hands and knees, shackled, being slapped and humiliated, and his best friend says, I don't know him. I cannot imagine what that would feel like. And Jesus, at the end of John, tells Peter, it's okay, take care of my people. Jesus pulls Peter back in. Our screw-ups, the things that we do that are not in line with what Jesus taught us, our screw-ups, our stupid mistakes, have nothing on what Peter did. Nothing on what Peter did. And yet Jesus embraces him and calls him back in. And if Jesus can do that for Peter, embrace him, call him back in, and say, I love you, I care for you, you're an important part of all of things. Ask yourself this question this week, and to you guys at home who are watching this, do you think he could do it for you? That's it. Just think about that.